I'm going to talk about my first ever half marathon. This was way back in 2011 when I decided to run the Bangalore Midnight Half Marathon. I remember training for this event for spending about 6 to 8 weeks. And then, of course, I was very confident. I wanted to target something like a 2 hours, 20 minutes kind of a time, because the longest distance that I ran was about 18 kilometers as part of my training just 1 week before the marathon. Downloaded some plans from the internet, and it was pretty interesting to discover something new. And also training for the half marathon was it's kind of built with a lot of excitement. But again, I had my own race day jitters. But I was super confident about one thing. If I tell you, I'm going to laugh at me in sometime. And I was standing at the front line. Okay, so this is like a pack of runners, maybe 200, 300 runners. I don't remember the count, but I was standing in the front line. I want to be the first guy to take off. And then I also found that towards my left and right side, there were a few African runners. They were like tiny, short, skinny-legged creatures. It was quite interesting to see them. You know, they looked like when I looked at them, it's like, okay, is he going to run a half marathon? Well, but then I saw their bibs, and most of them had a full marathon bib. And I was kind of taken back, and I said, okay, they look very skinny and malnutrition. How is this guy going to perform? But of course, the race started, the countdown started, the race began, and I started to run really fast. And I think for a few seconds, I was like the first guy to dash out of the start line. And then suddenly, after some time, and I saw all those runners who were those skinny-legged, short and very thin and frail looking runners. They all were speeding past me. They were going much faster than I. And then I was holding my phone and the Runkeeper app, and then maybe after running about 400, 500 meters, half a kilometer to be precise, and I was like gasping for breath. Okay, so my heart rate was shooting, and I had a very weird sense of too much of pressure running into my head, and my legs were kind of giving up. My my entire system started shutting down. That's when I realized that the pace I was running at was something like close to 350 or 4 pace, and I've never trained in that pace and never ran in that pace. But suddenly I couldn't run, and I had to slow down because I was like gasping. It is like a mad chase. And then I saw all these runners very gently taking off and running past me effortlessly. Okay. Suddenly some realization came in my mind, okay, what am I really doing? I'm trying to compete with somebody unknown, and instead of running my own race, I am competing with somebody else, and it sounded utterly ridiculous to me. But interestingly, as the run progressed and I kind of slowed down, walked for some time, caught my breath, and also had some water, some electrolyte, and then again started running. And of course, when I was at the second loop, I think it was a loop of 4 or 5 kilometers. So in the second loop, most of the runners who I thought were very frail and weak, they were almost finishing. They were coming to the finish line. So I was somewhere near the 10th kilometer, and I'm sure most of the runners had finished. The top pack runners finished. Now, kind of really an awakening moment for me. It taught me something amazing. It's like the competition that I was into. It was a wrong fight. It was a wrong competition to be in, first of all. And I should have just stuck to my strategy. I didn't have a strategy, to be precise. Being the first race, I didn't have much idea of how to race a marathon, the pacing strategy. Training was in some intensity, race was in some other intensity, and it was a little interesting experience. And of course, a lot of learning, a lot of discovery. I finished the race, by the way, in 2 hours and 3 minutes. Of course, the timing mattered a lot at that time, because I thought I would land somewhere in 220. Finishing 203 was super high, feeling that instantly I was flying high. But of course, the end of the race, my legs were totally weak and my joints were aching for 2-3 days. I was lying down in the bed, and it was quite an interesting first-time experience. Now, when I compare that with the Comrades Marathon when I ran, first time in 2014, which is a kind of an aborted mission, Halfway through, I had to bail out. But I started making some observations, some interesting observations, and I saw very many runners. They were there at the start line with different sizes and shapes. When I say size and shape, now of course I'm talking about their appearance, not the color and which country of origin. They were all from multiple places. Many Africans could see them. But the comrades, what it did was it kind of humbled my experience at the start line, because they put me in the D pen, which was actually designated for, no, C pen if I'm right. The C pen is the charity pen. With my qualification time, I should have gone to F, but the C pen, because I raised some money for charity, it was a good feeling. I was slightly ahead of my designated pen. But there, when the race started, and especially around 20-25 kilometers, and I could see there are a lot of runners. I witnessed them not wearing proper shoes. There's somebody had a cloth kind of tied around their shoes, and then somebody didn't have a lace, so I think they put some wrap with some tape. And even if you look at their dress, shirt and trousers, it's like any other casual weekend dress, and I certainly could make out that they were not wearing any of these so-called branded shoes and branded merchandise. This was kind of gave me a very different feeling, because I thought I was very much prepared for the run. I was wearing the branded shoes, the most desired one at that time, and also the dress, the gel that I was carrying, and I thought I was kind of prepared to run my ideal race. And of course, I was not physically fit. I had an injury, but otherwise, I felt great that I had all the right kind of merchandise and the gear to finish the race. But it gave me a very different realization when I bailed out at around 45 kilometers. It was a little sad moment, but I was prepared for that. I was sitting in a piece of rock next to Drummond, and I was just watching the way other runners were crossing, going ahead of me, and some of them were kind of struggling, some of them going really fast, some of them were kind of picking, they're enjoying singing. But if you see the branded shoes and the dresses that they were wearing versus their attitude, it had no connection. Okay, so the person who looked very poor seemed to have been the happiest person I'd ever seen in that entire community of runners that I was running with. So that experience certainly humbled me. And when I also, the second time when I ran the Comrades Marathon 2015, at around halfway through, I overtook a couple of runners. So there's one runner running with a tether. There was a small piece of thread connected with another runner. So they looked very different, and I thought they were buddies and they don't want to get separated. They look a little different, and I've never seen a sight like this. But when they around 65 kilometers, and I saw these two guys overtaking me, I was like walking, crawling, struggling. It was a quite strange experience. And then when I really looked at them, that's when I noticed that one of the runners was a blind runner. Okay, and the other runners is called as a guide runner. And I was like completely thrown out. I said, my goodness, look at this gentleman. There are two people who can run and walk much better than I, and of course they were much more confident. They were singing or chatting loudly, and they were crossing me. That's when I realized that all this competition that we all have in our life is meaningless. Of course, competitiveness is important. The competition also defines certain purpose for us to win, and the winning means better performance. Better performance means better preparation. Better preparation means we have a better attitude towards the entire sport. So that's exactly what I mean by the competitiveness. And the competition itself is going to help me every time I step out to enhance my performance, because I think even the psychologists have done a lot of research to knowing that cyclists perform much better in a competitive environment rather than racing against the time. I have experienced that. I've given my best performances in races, but at the same time, whenever I wanted to run on my own, I was alone. The performances, there's kind of lack of motivation for me to go and push and test my limits. So, this competition is important. My learning here is the competition has to be well within us. It's always the comparison between who I was yesterday, who I am today, and also who I want to be, let's say tomorrow, or a week later, or a month later. And then we need to chase our own dreams, our own goals. But at the same time, there are two things. If somebody is struggling, see if there is a way you can cheer them up in your life. It doesn't matter whether it's just in a marathon course or even in our life. You might find few people who are struggling to do or achieve certain things. No, we can always pat them and say that, come on, you can do this. Okay, so that little word of encouragement suddenly fuels our thought process and then energizes. And you also feel great about it. When I appreciate somebody, I feel great about this. The person receiving the appreciation also suddenly feels energized, and you're not going to actually go and solve their problem, but that little boost of energy is going to help them achieve a better goal. But at the same time, if somebody is going past you, instead of worrying about, okay, why is he running fast, you can always appreciate their effort and pat and encourage them. That little word of encouragement can make them perform better. You feel great, they feel great. That's exactly the reason why I love running marathons and ultra marathons, because they humbled me all the time, and I'm sure all my friends and clients who I speak with, they all come and share their experience. They all talk about how humbling the experience is when you run a marathon. All right, that's all for today, and see if you can think about running a marathon one day in your life if you're not into running. But if you've been running, and I'm assuming that you know exactly what I'm talking about. See you tomorrow.